Let's be honest. When a relationship ends, it rarely feels like there's real closure. Maybe he walked away without much explanation. Maybe things ended with tension, or even worse, silence. And in the quiet that follows, you're left wondering, was that really it? Was that the final word? Or is there a chance, however small, that he might come back? That somewhere deep down, he's thinking about you, missing you, maybe even hoping for a way back in. But here's the catch. Men rarely just say they're ready to reconnect. Not with words anyway. They use signs. Subtle, quiet, often easy to miss signals that he might be inching back toward you. And unless you know exactly what to look for, you could misread them. Or worse, miss them altogether. That's why today I want to pull back the curtain on the secret signs a man gives off when he's starting to realize what he lost, and that he might be ready to come back into your life. Now, before we dive in, let's be clear. This isn't about waiting around for someone to change. This isn't about hanging your heart on hope. It's about clarity. It's about emotional intelligence. The ability to read between the lines, to spot patterns in behavior, and to understand what's really going on beneath the surface of what he says or doesn't say. Because while every guy is different, when a man starts thinking about rekindling something, there are certain things he always does. Maybe he starts reaching out in small, seemingly insignificant ways. A comment on your Instagram story. I just saw this and thought of you text. Maybe he brings up an inside joke, or asks about something he never really paid attention to before. These moments might seem harmless on the surface, but they're not. They're the equivalent of a breadcrumb trail, and if you know how to follow it, you can tell exactly what direction he's heading in. Other times, it's not even about what he says, it's about what he shows. Has he suddenly started taking care of himself again? Is he doing better? Working out, picking up new hobbies, finding purpose? Men often try to improve themselves when they feel the loss of someone significant, not because they want to impress you necessarily, but because losing you forced them to confront who they were when they had you. And if he's doing that in a work, that's no accident. But here's the thing most people miss. A man doesn't always come back when you want him to. He comes back when he's ready. And that readiness has nothing to do with time and everything to do with growth. If he started showing up in ways that reflect change, consistency, reflection, or even vulnerability, that's when the door to reconnection starts to crack open. This isn't about playing games. It's not about chasing someone who walked away. It's about recognizing the signals of genuine intent, real intent, and learning how to respond with grace, strength, and most importantly, boundaries. Because if he is ready to reconnect, you need to know whether he's coming back for you or just for the comfort of what you once were. That first unexpected message, the one that seems completely innocent, is rarely just a coincidence. It might be a, hey, saw this and thought of you, or a, how have you been, that pops up on your screen when you least expect it. And while on the surface it looks like a friendly check-in, it often carries a much deeper undertone. This kind of casual contact is almost never as casual as it appears. When a man reaches out after a period of silence, especially after a breakup or an emotional disconnect, it's usually not because he randomly thought of you and decided to act on it without hesitation. That message often follows a period of internal struggle, curiosity, or even longing. He might have been lurking quietly in the background, checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, reflecting on past conversations. But now, something in him finally compelled him to break the silence. And he won't usually dive in with some grand declaration, no big, I miss you, no heart on sleeve moment. Why? Because it's safer to test the waters. It's safer to re-enter your space through something casual, a meme, a funny memory, a random excuse to reach out. Because if you respond coldly, or worse, not at all, he can tell himself it was nothing serious, that he was just being friendly, that he didn't really put himself on the line. But if you do respond warmly, if you show a little spark of curiosity or openness, then he knows there's space to keep going. This kind of contact is a breadcrumb. It's not about getting everything back in one message. It's about seeing if the door is still open, even a crack. He wants to know, are you still emotionally accessible to him? Would you still consider hearing him out? He's trying to find a path back into your life, but he's not charging in with certainty. He's tiptoeing in, and he's doing it with calculated. Sometimes it's not even a direct message. He might like a few old photos, comment on a story, or start showing up where he knows you'll notice him. These low-risk behaviors are all about re-establishing presence in your awareness without forcing a confrontation. He's trying to remind you he exists, but without admitting that's what he's doing. The timing of the message matters too. Is it late at night? Is it after a major life event? Is it on a date that used to mean something between you, an anniversary, a birthday, the day you first met? If so, that timing is no accident. He's likely been feeling the weight of those memories and finally cracked. He might not even understand fully why he's reaching out, but emotionally he's being pulled in your direction again. Another thing to notice is the tone. Is it overly light and humorous? Does it feel like he's trying to avoid saying anything too meaningful but still wants to stay connected? That's a common defense mechanism. He might be feeling the vulnerability of missing you, but not yet willing to own it. So instead he'll mask it with humor, nostalgia, or even awkward small talk. Underneath it all, though, is a real question. Do you still care enough to answer? Also, ask yourself, why now? Why not 2 weeks ago? Why not earlier? Something prompted this moment. Maybe he saw a photo of you looking amazing. Maybe he heard you've started seeing someone. Maybe he simply had a moment of quiet where the noise in his life faded and he was left alone with the reality of how much space you once occupied and how empty that space now feels. That kind of moment can hit hard. And when it does, his instinct will be to reach out in the only way he knows how. Soft, subtle, and safe. This casual message might feel small, but it's often loaded with emotion he's not ready to say out loud. Pay attention not just to the words, but to the context, the frequency, and the unspoken energy behind them. Often, the first step toward reconnection doesn't come with a grand gesture. It comes disguised as a simple, almost forgettable message, a few harmless words that carry the weight of everything he hasn't yet said. When a man starts reaching back out after distance or disconnection, one of the most telling signs is his sudden interest in the past you shared together. It's rarely random. These callbacks to shared memories, private moments, or inside jokes serve a specific emotional purpose. They're his way of re-establishing emotional intimacy without explicitly stating his intentions. He might not say, "I miss you," but when he says, "Remember that ridiculous pizza place we found at 2 a.m. in the rain," what he's really saying is, "I still think about the time when we were close. I still think about us." Shared memories are powerful because they're personal. They're proof that something real happened. When he brings up those moments, he's trying to awaken the emotional thread that once tied the two of you together. He wants you to feel something, nostalgia, warmth, even a bittersweet ache. It's his way of reminding you of the connection you had, especially if time or circumstances have dulled it. He's saying, "Hey, we had something special. Do you remember what that felt like?" But without ever needing to say it so directly. What makes this even more telling is the type of memory he chooses to bring up. He's not referencing random facts. He's referencing specific things that mattered, things that meant something to you both. Maybe it's a trip you took together, an awkward first date that turned into an amazing night, or even something silly like a phrase you two made up that no one else would understand. These aren't just stories, they're emotional bookmarks. By bringing them up, he's inviting you to reopen those pages, to feel what you felt when the moment first happened. Inside jokes take this even further. Jokes are deeply tied to emotional bonding. When two people create humor together, they create a secret language, a shorthand that only works because of shared experience and mutual understanding. If he suddenly sends you a GIF, a meme, or a random message that references an old joke only the two of you would get, it's not a coincidence. It's an emotional signal. It means he still feels that bond, and he's testing to see if you do too. Can we still laugh together? Do we still get each other? Is there still a rhythm between us, even after all this time? Sometimes, the memory he brings up isn't even light or humorous. It could be something more meaningful. Something like, "I was just driving past that beach we used to go to, and it made me think of that night we talked about everything." That kind of message is less about nostalgia and more about emotional depth. It's his way of saying, "I still remember the vulnerable moments, the real conversations, the parts of you that no one else got to see." And that's important because it shows he's not just remembering you in general, he's remembering the emotional connection he had with you. Even more interesting is when he references moments you didn't even know had an impact on him. Maybe you once made a joke in passing or mentioned something you loved, and he brings it up months later. That means he was paying attention. That means those little moments stuck with him, and he's replaying them now, trying to find his way back through the things he knows you once shared. Sometimes these memory references come cloaked in humor, like he's trying to keep things light. But don't let that fool you. The fact that he's referencing anything at all, especially something specific and personal, means he's thinking about you in a way that goes beyond casual. He's not just being friendly. He's reaching for that emotional bridge between you. He's trying to recreate familiarity, safety, and shared experience. You might even notice he phrases it in a way that invites a response, like, "I bet you still laugh every time someone says pineapple," or "Do you still insist that breakfast tastes better after midnight?" These aren't just rhetorical questions. They're feelers, they're invitations. He's not just remembering, he's hoping you'll remember too, and that you'll step back into that moment with him, even briefly. Ultimately, when a man starts pulling shared memories into your current conversation, he's signaling something important. He still values the connection you had. He's trying to reawaken it in a subtle, emotionally layered way that feels safe for both of you. He might not be ready or even able to say what he really wants just yet, but he's already speaking in the language of the past to test whether there's still space for him in your present. When a man starts to genuinely ask about your life again, how you're doing, what you're up to, how things have been going, it can seem innocent enough on the surface. Maybe it's just polite curiosity. Maybe it's just small talk. But when it comes after a period of distance or detachment, that kind of interest is rarely random. It's an emotional pulse check. He wants to know where you are, emotionally, mentally, even physically. But more importantly, he's doing it without demanding something in return. That absence of expectation is key. People can tell a lot about a man's intentions, not by what he asks, but by how he responds to your answers. Is he truly listening? Does he follow up? Does he remember what you told him and bring it up later? If so, that's not surface level conversation. That's someone trying to re-establish emotional access to you, not through pressure or charm, but through curiosity and consistency. He wants to understand your world again. He wants a window back into the life he used to be part of, and he's not rushing to claim space in it. He's simply asking to observe, to learn, to reconnect on a human level first. Often, this kind of interest appears in the smallest ways. He might ask how work's going, but he actually listens to the answer. He remembers the name of that project you mentioned, or circles back to see how it turned out. Maybe he checks in after your vacation, or wants to know how your mum's doing after that surgery you once mentioned in passing. This attention to detail is not accidental. When a man begins noticing the pieces of your life again, and not just the glamorous or social parts, but the mundane, the real, that's a clear sign of emotional reinvestment. He might also start supporting you in small ways, even from a distance, sending encouragement before a big interview, cheering you on when you mention a personal goal, sharing an article that relates to something you're working on. These gestures are subtle, but they say more than words. I'm still in your corner. I still want to be a part of your life, even if it's only in a quiet, unobtrusive way. He's showing up emotionally, not because he expects anything in return, but because something in him is drawn back to the role he once played in your story. Another important layer to this is the absence of self-interest. If he's not steering the conversation back to himself, if he's not using your answers as a springboard to talk about his own experiences, then his motives are clearer. He's not just catching up for ego validation. He's not fishing for compliments or trying to position himself back into your life with charm or manipulation. He's simply trying to see you again, to understand who you are now outside of the version of you that he once knew. That kind of unselfish interest is a mark of growth. It shows he's reflecting, not just reacting. You might also notice that he asks about the people around you, your friends, your family, maybe even your co-workers or new hobbies. He's trying to get a sense of your environment. Who's important to you now? What are you prioritizing? How have your values shifted, if at all? These aren't just filler questions. They're a way of mapping out the version of you he's missed. They allow him to step into your current world respectfully, without assuming that he still belongs in it. There's also something telling about the timing of his interest. Is he reaching out during your important moments? Is he showing up with support when things are tough? These are indicators of emotional reliability, not just fleeting nostalgia. He's trying to prove, perhaps even to himself, that he still cares, that he's capable of being present in a way he might not have been before. Sometimes, this kind of interest is restrained. He's not overstepping or flooding your phone with messages. He's not interrogating you about your love life or probing for signs that you're still available. He's respecting your space while quietly showing you that you still matter to him. That restraint is intentional. He knows that pushing too hard could backfire, so instead he offers you the gift of his attention, freely, without strings, without demand. All of this comes down to energy. You feel when someone is checking in because they care, not because they're lonely. You know when someone wants to understand your journey, not because they want to interrupt it, but because they want to witness it. When he asks about your life and expects nothing back, not a date, not a flirty reply, not a chance to jump back in, he's showing a different kind of readiness, not just to reconnect, but to re-earn your trust through small, consistent presence. When a man is truly starting to reconsider a past relationship, especially one that ended because of his own limitations, one of the most powerful signs is a shift in how he's showing up in the world. You begin to see evidence of personal growth, small but intentional changes in his behavior, attitude, and lifestyle that weren't there before. These changes aren't just for show. They often come from a place of reflection, of looking back at what went wrong and understanding what role he played in it. Personal growth doesn't always look like some big dramatic transformation. It often begins quietly. Maybe he starts working on his communication skills. Where he once shut down during conflict, now he seems more open, more thoughtful, less reactive. Maybe he's taking accountability for past behaviors that used to deflect or minimize. You notice he's no longer blaming others or hiding behind excuses. That willingness to own his part in what went wrong is a major sign that he's been doing the kind of internal work that isn't comfortable or easy. You might also see him investing more energy into his physical health, his mental well-being, or his career, not in a flashy look at me kind of way, but with consistency and purpose. He's at the gym regularly now, not because he wants to impress anyone, but because he's learning to respect himself. He's seeing a therapist, reading books on emotional intelligence, or journaling in ways he never would have considered before. These changes indicate that he's no longer running from his emotions or avoiding the truth of who he was. He's facing it. And more importantly, he's doing something about it. Another sign is how he talks about relationships in general. If you find him speaking more maturely about love, commitment, and emotional responsibility, that's not just a shift in words, it's a reflection of deeper understanding. Where he may have once seen vulnerability as weakness, he's now learning to value it. Where he once feared commitment or equated freedom with distance, he's now exploring the idea that real intimacy requires presence, consistency, and emotional depth. These aren't just philosophical changes, they're signs that he's reevaluating how he wants to show up for someone else. You may even hear him mention the past with a new kind of clarity. Not defensiveness, not regret dripping in nostalgia, but real acknowledgement. I didn't handle that well, or I see now why you felt that way, are phrases that reflect growth. He's not rewriting history to make himself look better. He's owning it, piece by piece. That kind of emotional honesty is a quiet but powerful indicator that he's been doing the work on his own terms. When a man begins to feel the pull toward reconnection, especially after a breakup or a long period of emotional distance, he doesn't always come out and say what he feels. Instead of bold declarations or direct apologies, you might start to hear things that sound like passing comments, offhand reflections, or subtle acknowledgements. But they carry an emotional weight underneath that's impossible to miss. These indirect expressions of vulnerability or regret are often more revealing than anything overt, because they're unfiltered moments where his guard slips, even if only for a second. It might show up in something simple, like him mentioning how certain songs hit differently now. Maybe he says he was watching a movie that made him think about life, or how he's been reflecting more lately. These moments aren't accidental. He's signaling that he's in a more introspective space, that he's been thinking about the past, about decisions he made, and more specifically about how those decisions affected you. He won't always say it was about you, but the emotional tone behind it often makes that clear. One of the most telling signs is when he brings up the idea of timing. He might say things like, "I just wasn't in the right headspace back then," or "I didn't know how to handle what I was feeling." These comments are rarely just about circumstance. They're often veiled admissions of guilt or sadness about how things turned out. He's not just talking about what happened. He's talking about how he mishandled something meaningful. He's not ready to unpack it fully, but he's laying pieces of it down for you to see, hoping you'll pick up on the subtext. Sometimes, vulnerability leaks out through humor. He might joke about how clueless he used to be, or how he probably broke a few hearts along the way. On the surface, it's lighthearted, but underneath, it's a soft confession. He's telling on himself without making it too serious. It's a protective mechanism, one that allows him to test your emotional response without diving into discomfort too deeply. If you laugh, he feels safe. If you show understanding, he might open up more. If you react with indifference or pain, he knows not to push further. Another common route is when he talks about his own flaws, not in a self-deprecating, attention-seeking way, but in a manner that shows he's been thinking. He might say, "I used to shut down when things got too real," or "I wasn't the best communicator." These aren't just random insights. They're admissions wrapped in reflection. He's acknowledging the things that may have driven you apart, and he's doing it without directly tying it to your relationship, yet it's clear that's where the insight comes from. You might also notice that he brings up certain what-if questions. Do you ever wonder how things could have turned out if we had handled things differently? Or, "I think about that time a lot more than I expected to." These are emotional breadcrumbs. They're not just about curiosity, they're about missed chances. A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help@openai.com. One of the most understated but powerful ways a man signals his readiness to reconnect is when he consciously or unconsciously starts to create a space that feels emotionally safe between you again. When a man is serious about rekindling something real, he knows that the only way to bridge the distance is to make you feel like you can trust him again. Not because he asks for it, but because he earns it in small, steady ways. You start to notice that he communicates more thoughtfully. He's careful with his words, not in a calculated way, but in a considerate one. Where he might have once been defensive or dismissive, now he seems to be listening differently. He gives you space to speak, and more importantly, he makes room for your feelings, even if those feelings are uncomfortable for him to hear. He doesn't try to rush you toward forgiveness or understanding. He's patient. That patience is a form of respect, and it sends a clear message. Your emotional experience matters to him. He also becomes more reliable in small but noticeable ways. He follows through when he says he will. He responds when he says he's going to. There's no more ghosting, no more inconsistency, no more of that uncertainty that made you question your own worth. Each time he shows up, on time, with presence, with calmness, it builds a new foundation beneath your interactions. That consistency doesn't need to be flashy. In fact, it usually isn't. It's in the quiet repetition of showing up the right way, even in the smallest exchanges. There's also a shift in his energy. He's no longer reactive or trying to win an argument. Instead, he's focused on understanding your perspective. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't minimize your emotions. If you bring up something that hurt you in the past, he doesn't roll his eyes or make excuses. He listens, and maybe for the first time, he really hears it. That act alone can be deeply healing, especially if the earlier version of him struggled with emotional maturity. When he makes space for your truth without trying to correct or fix it, he's saying, "You are safe here." You may even notice he doesn't push for clarity or answers before you're ready to give them. If you're hesitant or unsure, he doesn't guilt you. If you need time, he offers it. He's not trying to rush you into feeling something again. He's not trying to recreate the past instantly. That restraint is meaningful because it shows that this time, he's not trying to take shortcuts through your emotional boundaries. He's respecting them. That respect, when offered sincerely and consistently, is one of the most profound signals of emotional safety. In conversations, he may start validating your emotions more openly, not with empty affirmations, but with real understanding. If you say something was painful, he doesn't argue the facts, he acknowledges the impact. "I didn't realize how much that hurt you. I see it now." Statements like that don't just reflect empathy, they reflect emotional accountability. He's no longer trying to be right, he's trying to... That emotional shift changes everything. It tells you he's not just trying to rebuild a connection, he's trying to rebuild trust. one honest interaction at a time. He might even take initiative to bring up conversations that previously went avoided. Maybe topics that were once sources of conflict or discomfort are now met with openness. He's not afraid to talk about the hard stuff anymore. And that courage, combined with softness, creates a very specific emotional container, one where you no longer feel like you're walking on eggshells, one where your emotions have room to exist fully without judgment. Sometimes you'll sense the difference, not just in how he talks, but in how he doesn't talk. There's less posturing, less need to prove something, less defensiveness. He's quieter in the best way, present, grounded, and no longer trying to mask insecurity with bravado or sarcasm. That calmness often comes after a man has faced his own emotional landscape and started to reconcile with who he is. And in that reconciliation, he becomes capable of creating space that doesn't ask you to shrink, silence yourself, or carry the emotional burden alone. Even in moments where emotions run high, his reaction changes. Instead of shutting down, deflecting, or blaming, he might just say, "I hear you," or "That makes sense." He doesn't weaponize your vulnerability. He doesn't use your honesty against you. He creates room for both of your truths to exist without collapsing the space between you. That's emotional safety in motion, when you can bring your whole self to the table and not feel like you're going to pay for it later. He might also show a new awareness of your emotional needs. Maybe he anticipates when you're feeling overwhelmed or knows when to back off without disappearing. Maybe he's asking questions like, "What do you need from me right now?" instead of assuming. That awareness isn't accidental. It comes from attention, from experience, from care. And when a man begins consistently offering that kind of awareness, it's not just a sign that he's changed. It's a sign that he's starting to understand what love actually looks like in action. One of the clearest, yet most emotionally charged signs that a man is thinking about reconnecting is when he begins to weave you into the fabric of his future, delicately, almost cautiously, but unmistakably. These gestures aren't always grand or overt. In fact, they're often dropped in casual conversation, where the words themselves seem harmless, but the meaning behind them carries weight. He's testing the waters, seeing if there's still space in your world for him to be part of what's next, not just what was. You may notice he starts talking about plans that extend beyond the present moment, future trips, events, even life goals, and somehow you're in the picture. Maybe he mentions going to a concert a few months from now and says something like, "You'd love it." Or he jokes about how the two of you should finally visit that place you always talked about. These aren't random ideas. They're invitations, veiled in hypotheticals, to imagine a future where you're still connected. And he's not forcing it. He's suggesting it gently, hoping you'll meet him halfway in the imagining. It's not just about physical plans, though. He begins to show you that he's thinking long-term, even if he doesn't say it outright. You can sense it in the way he speaks about stability, career moves, or emotional goals. Suddenly he's talking about buying a home someday, or wanting a better work-life balance, or raising kids in a certain kind of environment. And while he may not be directly saying, "I want that with you," there's a noticeable shift in his language. He's not talking like someone who's living only for the moment. He's talking like someone building a foundation. And he wants you to notice that the door is open. He might also bring up memories from your past, but not in a nostalgic or regretful way. Instead, he uses those memories as reference points for the future. "Remember that little cabin we stayed in during that storm? I've been thinking we should do something like that again." There's a subtle blending of past and future here. He's not stuck in what was. He's trying to use it as a bridge toward what could be. It's a careful move, one that reflects hope but also caution, because he doesn't want to push you into something you're not ready for. What's powerful is how intentional he becomes about creating space for you in his life decisions. You might hear him ask for your opinion on things he used to decide on his own. He'll want to know what you think about where he's planning to move or what you do in a certain situation at work. That inclusion isn't just about gathering input. It's about signaling that your thoughts matter, that your perspective carries weight in how he shapes his life moving forward. Even his language starts to shift. He says "we" a little more often. He talks about things in terms of partnership, not solitude. And though he may not label it as a relationship yet, his words begin to echo the mindset of someone who's mentally and emotionally preparing for one. It's in the way he says things like, "If I were in a relationship again, I'd want it to look like this," while glancing at you just long enough for the subtext to land. It's not manipulation, it's not pressure, it's vulnerability expressed in future tense. There's also an emotional intimacy that begins to deepen when a man starts envisioning you in his future. He doesn't just share updates about his life, he lets you into his process. He wants you to know what drives him, what scares him, what excites him. He begins to paint a fuller picture of himself, one that goes beyond the version you once knew. And as he shares that picture, it becomes clear that he's not just offering you a glimpse, he's offering you a seat beside him while he sketches what's next. He might not know how to say, "I want you to be a part of my future," outright. It's a hard thing to admit, especially when vulnerability wasn't always his strong suit. So he does it the way people do when they're afraid to hope too loudly, by building a narrative that includes you, piece by piece, detail by detail, until it becomes impossible not to see what he's doing. He's inviting you back into the story, not as a side note, not as a memory, but as a co-author of the next chapter. Sometimes it shows up in small details that most people wouldn't notice, like how he remembers your preferences and factors them into decisions, or how he's clearly thought about how your values would align in a shared life, or how he seems more focused on building a lifestyle that has emotional sustainability, one that doesn't just revolve around him, but considers how you would fit into it. Not in a possessive way, but in a way that suggests he's been imagining that life quietly for a while, wondering if he might finally be ready to build it with someone who matters.